When we first met, it's about 15 years ago. I don't remember the date or the place, and apparently neither do you. But it was a classroom, I think, at Berkeley, and you were talking about green jobs, not jails. At the time, you were running something. You had co-founded the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in Oakland, and here you were, this African-American man, talking about the green economy and the opportunity that it afforded everybody. And you subsequently founded an organization basically about that, Green for All, and went into wrote a best-selling book, the Green Collar Economy, and went into the Obama administration. I don't remember what happened. That's another story, I guess. And on and on. And then later, you created the Dream Corps, which are these 4 organizations you see: Green for All, Love Army, Yes We Code, you can see it down there, and Cut 50. We'll talk about a couple of those later on. But one of the interesting things that's happened, and then of course CNN and more books, and you have a new book coming out. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm sort of telling them. But what all of a sudden I hear you talking about green jobs, not jails again. So it feels like it's kind of come full circle. So I guess I want to ask you first, is that sort of a coming home? And how is the conversation today about green jobs, not jails, different from the one I heard 15 years ago?
Well, first of all, it's just good to be here. And I think 15 years ago, we probably had a lot more faith that government was going to change the rules so that people couldn't pollute for free, change the investment so there'd be some public money on the table to get this thing going. I think we now realize that government is going to be in the caboose, if at all, and that it's the people in this room, if we're going to have a green economy, it's going to be you guys in the private sector that get it done. So I think that's probably, if I was going to say what's a big takeaway, 10 years ago, we would have said, public sector is going to lead with some money, change the public rules, and then the private sector is going to come along behind, build a green economy. The big fight in building that green economy is going to be to make sure it's a green wave that lifts all boats, that doesn't leave anybody behind.
And that was what you were tasked to do, President Obama tasked you to do that. Right?
And, and I think that, for me, green jobs, not jails was an epiphany for me. It like 4 syllables that just came smashing into my head and just changed my life. It wasn't a choice, it wasn't a strategy, it wasn't a clever marketing scheme. I have been working to close prisons for a while in California. As you know, we wound up closing 5 youth prisons. We stopped them from building the super jail. We reformed the SFPD, the Oakland Police Department, got a bad cop fired, and I burned out. I was a complete mess.
Why? What were you burned out on?
I was burned out. Too many funerals, man. You go to too many funerals. When you work in urban environments, tough situations, tough kids, tough cases. You lose too many cases. You lose too many votes. Too many effed up ballot measures were passing to put more people in prison. People forget California, ground zero for mass incarceration. The United States, #1 incarcerator in the world. California, the #1 incarcerator of all the 50 states. So I'm here as a young guy, right out of Yale Law School, doing criminal justice, doing civil rights, losing all the time. The adult system getting bigger. We were able to push back on the youth system, but I couldn't take it anymore and had to go and get healthy. And it was in trying to get my own health pulled together, living in Oakland and then going to Marin County for meditation and all that stuff, and going back and forth and seeing, wait a minute, is this ecological apartheid? I mean, I'm literally going from cancer clusters and no jobs to solar panels and hybrid cars and hybrid buses and salads, all kind of stuff. And so
Is that what Green for All is?
Hey, listen, I mean, it was such a wild experience to go from doing those urban fights to then going to Marin County and realizing this whole green economy was growing. And I saw it strictly as, wait a minute, hold on a second. You're going to be growing all these new companies, new products, new services. You need some workers. I've got young people out here who need jobs. Well, why don't we let the people who most need work do the work that most needs to be done? And we can fight pollution and poverty at the same time. And that brought me back. I mean, it was a personal salvation. And that I mean, literally, I was going across the bridge back to Oakland, and I said, we need green jobs, not jails. And it just grabbed me. It was an idea that just grabbed me. And we wound up getting the Green Jobs Corps going in Oakland. Nancy Pelosi came over, saw it, thought it was amazing, took me to Washington, D.C. We got a guy named George W. Bush to sign a bill called the Green Jobs Act. Wow. 2007, wrote a book, 2008, bestseller, 6 languages, 100 U.S. universities. A guy named Barack Obama read the book, and suddenly we're off. And then you deal with the backlash. And people act like the backlash just started in November. But the backlash against the progress and the hopes and the dreams of 2008 started in 2008.
Oh, I remember.
And so, so for me, getting a chance to, after I left the White House under fire from my left-wing Berserkly background, taught at Princeton for a while, worked with Prince until he died, got a chance to be on CNN. But I've never given up this fight. I mean, to me, not because it's my idea, though it's a great idea, but the idea of green jobs, not jails, the idea that you could have a green economy that's strong enough to lift people out of poverty, that you could deal with social inequality and environmental destruction at the same time with the same solution, to me that's as profound an idea in the 21st century as all are created equal in the 1700s, or I have a dream in the 1900s. It's that powerful an idea. But I've had to go and try to figure out other tools to advance that cause.
So how are we doing?
It's a tale of two movements. I mean, one of the things that I think you guys have an opportunity to do something about is that we still have this almost, it's an embarrassment and it's tough to talk about, but we almost have a racially segregated environmental movement in that we have what we call mainstream environmentalism, which are the organizations that we all know, we all love, we all support, but they have $100 million budgets, and their constituencies are overwhelmingly white and affluent. And then we have what we call environmental justice, EJ. And these groups are almost entirely people of color, and if they have a $500,000 budget, they're doing huge. Yeah. I mean, these groups are lucky to have a $20,000, $40,000. So you have this, we're the only cause I know of that accepts this sort of racial division inside of our movement, and we don't talk about it. And environmental justice in particular is really concerned with equal protection from bad stuff. Because, the dirty secret is you can't hurt the planet without hurting people. And the people that you hurt are usually the poorest. So who lives next to the dumps? Who lives next to the incinerators? Who lives next to the refineries? Who has the most lead poisoning? Always the poorest. So if you protect the poorest, you're protecting the planet, because it's the poor people that always get dumped on. You guys are in a situation where you can go beyond even that. It's not just about equal protection, but also about equal opportunity. In other words, why should those communities that were hit first and worst for everything bad in the old industrial pollution-based economy, why should those very same communities that got hit first and worst on the bad stuff then benefit last and least for all the good stuff? Look at all this good stuff. So to me, that's the big opportunity that we still have, is to say, listen, we do have now this takeoff, a second takeoff now in the green sectors, and there's a second opportunity now to make sure it includes people.
So we have the green apartheid that you saw 15 years ago really still exists, and I would, from my vantage point, would say that there's still not that many people of color, people coming out of West Oakland or any hood that working for the solar, wind.
Not enough.
Not enough. And so I want to tie together two of the boxes on the screen there, which I think is something that's...
By the way, that looks really cool. I mean, we got some good design folk at the Dream Corps, so give them a round of applause, whoever made that. That looks awesome.
I took that off your website.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
They were two, never mind, doesn't matter. So, Green for All
Yeah.
is, as we've kind of said, that's the opportunity. Cut 50.
Yeah.
Talk about that, and then let's connect those dots.
Yeah. Well, Cut 50 is our campaign. It's a bipartisan campaign to cut the prison population in half over the next 10 years, working with Republicans and Democrats.
And wasn't Newt Gingrich one of your allies in this?
Absolutely. You know, Newt and I had a television show together called Crossfire. And it turned out that we didn't agree on anything, just nothing. So it was a well-named show. And, but on criminal justice, Newt shocked me and challenged me to go harder. He said, Van, you're pulling your punches. I said, what are you talking about? And he says, you talk about the racial dimension of incarceration. That's your issue. I understand that. He says, but as a conservative, I see the prison system now as a big failed government bureaucracy that's taking a lot of money and giving us terrible outcomes with no accountability. He says, I have people in my party who are libertarians who are very concerned about the government gobbling up more rights and liberties. And as a conservative Christian, I have to ask the question, where's the redemption? Where's the second chances? People leave a physical prison and then they come out into a social prison where they're not allowed to vote in a lot of states, they're not allowed to rent apartments, get student loans. A lot of people won't hire them. So he says, from my point of view as a conservative, the prison system is now a disaster. And I said, where have you been all my life? You know, like this is, like I'm getting a little faint here.
And with Newt, you got to watch out because he's got a reputation.
Yeah, exactly. So you can rub my knee. So, but you know, it wound up being a profound partnership because I think we've gotten to the point in the country where we disagree on so much that it almost doesn't matter where we do agree, and that's dangerous.
And before we get to sort of the solution side of that, I think we just saw one piece, small piece, but significant piece of this with Hurricane Harvey.
Yeah.
And there were some, I think there were ICE detention centers,
Yeah.
and maybe some prisons, also possibly in Florida. I don't know the full story, but that were not evacuated.
Sure. I mean, this part of the reason why I want the people in this room who you are going to be, if we have a green economy, it's going to be because you built it and designed it. Part of the reason I want you to have the right design principles, which is that we don't have any throwaway resources, we don't have any throwaway species, and we don't have any throwaway people either. That it's all precious, it's all sacred, and we want to design the green economy from the beginning to include everybody, which means when you think about your hiring, you want to think about, you know, are we doing a great job? Including women, including people of color, giving people who are coming home from prisons a second chance, people coming home from wars an opportunity. There's a lot of genius that just goes to waste in America because we're always looking for somebody who's got a fancy Ivy League degree like I do, and we're not looking for somebody who can actually, you know, do the job and maybe bring something completely different. So what happens when we don't look at the world that way? We're going to have more and more extreme weather events, heat waves, floods, and they always say, well, listen, get out of this area, you know, it's mandatory evacuation, get out of here. Guess who can't get out of the way? People who are in prison, people who are detained, people who are in you know, immigration detention centers, people who are already vulnerable, sometimes baked to death in their cells in these heat waves. 1,816 federal inmates in Texas were not moved in that flood. So they were flooded in the prison. They had to drink water out of the toilets. I mean, it was a terrible situation. This is what happens, and this is in a country now where we rightfully moved heaven and earth to clear the animal shelters, rightfully. We moved heaven and earth in Florida. We airlifted dolphins out of the theme parks in Florida, rightfully so, because those animals are in captivity. They can't get out of harm's way by themselves, but we left people behind in federal prisons. So this is the kind of thing, if we're going to have more extreme weather, part of the policy has to be, well, how do we responsibly deal with this when it comes to incarcerated populations?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, there's so much to talk about in so little time, but I want to talk about the Cut 50.
Yeah.
Green for all. I mean, so is there an opportunity? First of all, Cut 50, there's a whole number of barriers that keep companies, well-intentioned, progressive, all kinds of companies, from hiring the formerly incarcerated. One of which is the box that says, have you ever been, that I know there's a campaign, ban the box, to take that out. But do you see an opportunity to, I imagine you do see, to work with the formerly incarcerated in the green economy? How does that happen? Where does
well, it's one of those things where once you look at it, it's like a big, almost like a no duh. We have a big stigma against people who've been in prison. I don't want to hire those people. They've been in prison. But it's interesting to me. I went to Yale for law. I never saw so many drugs used in my life.
On campus?
As I saw on Ivy League campuses. Now I'm on TV, so I get to go all kind of places, country clubs, yacht clubs. It's known. I mean, don't raise your hand, but there's probably 1 or 2 people who've used drugs in this room. Don't raise your hand. But I never saw anybody at Yale go to prison.
Right.
So what are we actually talking about here? You have a country where drug use is rampant. Some people go to prison, some people go to rehab. And then on the back end of that process, we say, well, you know, you can get a job and you can't. Yeah. But it's worse than that. You actually look at it, one of the big problems that employers have right now is turnover, especially with the younger population. People they just go, you know, there's no shame anymore. I worked like in 9 jobs in the past, 4 months. Like people they just change jobs. Formerly incarcerated people are radically less likely to change jobs. If you give them that chance, you make that investment, they are radically less likely to leave. That loyalty will be there for you. So it's a better investment. It's a better bet. You also have a lot of extremely smart people in prison. I spend a lot of my time these days in prisons. And, you know, I'm glad that I don't have to compete with some of these guys. Because you have some utterly brilliant people who are behind bars when they come out. They can make somebody a lot of money, and they can make somebody a much better company. So I think that we often, though, say, well, that's just not my issue. I care about women. I don't care about that. Even though the biggest growing population of people behind bars are women, and often mothers. So, oh, it's not my issue. I care about the climate. Well, some people may think that the last election wasn't that great for climate. If more people were allowed to vote, both political parties might be different on some of these issues. In other words, in Florida, Texas, Georgia, you have a lot of people who are not allowed to vote because they have been convicted of a felony.
Right.
If that were different, you would have a bigger electorate, and both parties might behave very differently. So the idea that this is not my issue, whether it's politically or from a business point of view, to me doesn't make a lot of sense. I think actually one of the success stories waiting to happen is when the green sector begins to include more people. And let me just say one more thing about this. If you look at what happened in Nevada with all the solar subsidies getting wiped out, big problem. part of what the polluters are always able to do, part of what our opponents are always able to do, is to say, these people only care about rich white folks. They don't care about black and brown voters. They only care about the eco-elite crowd. And by then positioning those solar subsidies as a handout and a giveaway to rich folks in Nevada, they mobilize poor Latino and African American voters against the solar industry and damn near decapitated the solar industry. Because eco-apartheid doesn't work. It's not just not sustainable ecologically, it's not sustainable politically. Because what it does is that the ecological have-nots fight back. And you wind up with a backlash alliance between polluters and poor people that will actually stop you from getting the stuff done you want to get done. So it's morally right, it's ecologically right, it's also politically smart to have as inclusive a workforce as possible. Plus, you've got a huge opportunity to bring in a bunch of genius you wouldn't get otherwise.
We have a piece on the homepage of GreenBiz today written by this amazing woman named Vienne Trong, who is used to run Green for All and now runs Dream Corps and Green for All. And it's about moms working to protect the EPA budget. And she asked me, and I'm very happy to encourage all of you, what happened there, to support, come on, dude, all right, I'm not. To support this this movement by just, there it is, click text Verge to 97483 and sign this, because the EPA budget is going to get slashed if
you know something that's interesting about that?
Yeah.
So Trump has proposed 31% cut to the EPA budget. He wants to cut the EPA budget by a third. And what they talk about when they say, well, why do you want to do this? Well, because we want to deal with these job-killing regulations. So we're going to take a third of the budget away so we don't have job-killing regulations. What that actually is child-killing deregulation. That's child-killing deregulation. What you're going to do is you're going to flood poor communities with poison and pollution, and you're going to kill a bunch of American kids. Because the Environmental Protection Agency is actually protecting people. So if you take away, if they say a third of the regulations, no, it's a third of the protection. So you take away a third of the protection from American children, and you say you're a patriot, and you're making America great. From my point of view, this is a cause that we all need to rise to. And so Green for All is organizing mothers in particular to stick up and stand up for American children. Now that's a different kind of voice. Often we talk about the environment, we talk about our sister and brother species, but we don't talk about our sisters and brothers. And part of what Green for All is so amazing at, and Vienne Trong in particular is so amazing at, is putting a human face and a diverse human face on all these policies that we're fighting for.
So, wow, we're running out of time. Elaine, I'd like to get just one question, if we can, from the audience. What do we got?
Yeah, so we ran another poll with our online audience, and we asked, do you think organizations should commit to the hiring of formerly incarcerated people? And overwhelmingly, around 90% said yes. So the question is, what can our attendees and our audience online, which composes of corporates and governments and NGOs and startups and investors, what can they do to get back into the office, when they get back into the office, moving forward in terms of their hiring?
Yeah, what's your ask?
Well, a couple things. We actually have a summit coming up in Atlanta next month, October 31st, about this whole idea of second chances, giving people second chances. Often you think, yeah, well, that's great, it sounds good, it's easy for me to click yes and be a part of the 90%. I definitely don't want to be a part of the group that says I don't care about it. Often you feel that way, but then you go back to your office and you think, how do I even do this? My HR department might push back, my insurance people might push back. There's stuff that there may be pushback. It requires a serious commitment to say, listen, we want to try. Somebody just showed me some statistics that said, in one city alone, I think it's Philadelphia, if just 100 people wound up being able to get jobs. It would save the city $2 million. It just gives you a sense of, the multiplier effect of positivity. So if each company just said, listen, we're going to make a commitment, we're going to hire 1 or 2 people, we're going to try this out, we're going to figure this out, it could make a tremendous difference. And then once you figure out, hey, Jesus, this woman we hired, she's like our best hire by far. And you begin to create that flywheel effect, something really positive can happen. So I want you to be aware of our Second Chance Job Summit in Atlanta, is October 31st. There's also going to be a webinar that we're doing with Green Biz in December.
Yeah, we have committed as a company to continue to work with Van and Dream Corps, and we're going to do one of our webcasts, the TBD date, early December, to talk more about these issues and bring some more companies into the conversation.
I want to brag on Vian, just one thing, it's totally relevant. Vian Trong, you may not know her yet, you're going to hear all about her for the next several years. She's an amazing young woman. She's a Vietnamese refugee boat baby, literally, 11th of 11 kids. Her parents wound up getting to the United States after the war in Vietnam. They worked in sweatshops and as farm workers, but they put their money on her, sent her to law school. She came out of law school, rather than going to make a bunch of money, she decided she's going to take on these tough causes. And she has become, Vian Trong, one of the most effective climate strategists in the world. This $2 billion fund in California where they took money from polluters and invested it in poor communities so low-income folks could have solar panels and electric vehicles, electric buses, et cetera. That was largely her work and her network's work. As a result, in California, we're now able to do stuff that proves the point. And just one thing, a company won a contract to plant 1,000 trees or something like that in Oakland based on this money, and they're hiring formerly incarcerated people to do it. So here we are in California, policy resulted in some money, and now companies can compete for those dollars, and they're greening Oakland and creating jobs for people coming home. This can be done. This is the kind of stuff that inspires people around the world and can help your company compete, but also feel great about itself. It helps with the brand equity, all that kind of stuff. Vian Trong is a genius. She's not here, but give her a round of applause. I love Vian Trong.
Yeah. Well, we are sadly out of time. There's so many more things I'd like to talk about. You were here 2 or 3 years ago with Tom Steyer. We had a great conversation, and I look forward welcoming you back to Verge in Oakland in a couple of years, and we'll talk again about some of these things. You got a book coming out October 10th. There it is. So everyone look forward to that. But Van, you continue from the first, from the moment I saw you 15 years ago, and was just blown away by your ability to bridge worlds, make things make sense that frankly were foreign to me. And I bet are foreign to a lot of people here. And that is, you continue to be such an inspiration, such a gift, and I can't thank you enough. And please join me in thanking Van Jones.